Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our program this afternoon. This is the third in our series celebrating 60 years of the Newhouse School. And as we begin, Syracuse University acknowledges with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands Syracuse University now stands. We are celebrating Syracuse University's history today. We are recognizing the profound impact made by decades of graduates over those 60 years. We're going to look ahead to what the current students and the next generations are going to be able to accomplish. And obviously, as we celebrate what Syracuse University grads and Newhouse grads have done today, specifically in the fields of television, radio, and film, we acknowledge that this is just a small portion of the stories. These are just a small portion of the alumni representatives who have gone on to do amazing things. But these are folks who have done amazing things, have amazing stories to tell, and we hope that you will enjoy what you hear and also participate. Join us and answer some questions that we will ask along the way and participate in our trivia questions and let us know if you have any questions as well as we go along here. Let me introduce the folks who are joining us today for this program. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Chris Velardi, and I'm a 1995 Newhouse grad. I was in the broadcast journalism program before digital was a thing, I guess. Now it's broadcast and digital journalism. I serve as the Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Engagement and Annual Giving, and I have the privilege of being an adjunct instructor at Newhouse as well, serving kind of as a utility player, I guess you could say, in broadcast and in journalism. I've taught writing courses, broadcasting courses, ethics courses, and it's a thrill to be able to stay connected to the Newhouse School and to be a part of this history and to deal with and help the next generation of students. So let's meet some of the panelists that we have with us today. Doug Robinson is executive producer and owner of Doug Robinson Productions. He is a 1985 Syracuse grad. Dwight Caines is the president of domestic marketing for Universal Pictures. He joins us from the West Coast as well. And Dion Summers, who I know very well because we were Z89 folk back in the day, is the vice president of urban music at Sirius XM. And Rosie Grace is co-owner and writer and producer at Small Talk Productions. Thanks to all of you for being a part of this today and for sharing your stories and your Newhouse journey. But before I ask you questions, I'm going to ask some questions of those who have gathered here on Zoom with us. We're going to use a program called Slido. It's very easy to use. There's a QR code. All you have to do is grab your phone. If you're watching this on your phone, that's going to be a little tricky. I acknowledge that. But if you are not watching on your phone, grab your phone, hit that QR code, and then you can participate with our trivia questions. You can participate in answering some of the questions we're going to ask. And the first is we just want to know, where are you joining us from today? We know that Newhouse representatives are all around the globe and certainly all around the country here as well. And we were just talking before we got started today, and Rosie said, a lot of us moved away from, yeah, exactly. There you go, Los Angeles. A lot of us moved away from Syracuse. It did snow here yesterday, measurable, appreciable snow, unfortunately. But love that folks are joining from all over the place. New York City, Los Angeles, right here in Syracuse. Oh, north of Toronto. All right, Cleveland. Good to see all of these spots represented. That's fantastic. All right, we've got a couple trivia questions, and we would love to. All right, there we go. Northern New Hampshire, another maybe another Z89er, another 95er perhaps. Let's talk about the Bleier Center for Television and Popular Culture. When was that founded at Newhouse? We make it multiple choice. It makes it a little bit easier. So weigh in, let us know what you think. We're split at this point. No clear winner. Give it a little more time. Obviously, Bob Thompson, who is so well known for his pop culture expertise, is leading that charge now for us and has been. And I will say, as the numbers kind of look at the stock market over the last couple of days, up and down and all over the place. It's hard to follow. We'll stop here and say 1997. You're right. That is the correct answer. And most folks have gotten that. That's fantastic. I've already mentioned WJPZ 89 a couple of times, and I will more because Dion and I are partial to that. But let's move on to our next trivia question, which is about another Syracuse University radio station. What is the call sign? So I've already given you one of the answers is not correct. What is the call sign for the radio station licensed to Syracuse University and is part of the Newhouse School? All right, a couple of votes for JPZ, but I think y'all know it's WAER at 88.3. And that is the original home of the Orange, as they like to say, as they call Syracuse men's basketball and football and men's lacrosse games. All right, let's move on to the next trivia question we have. Most of the folks knew WAER, and we would expect that to be the case. In 2014, what movie was adopted based on the best-selling novel by John Green? Was it The Fault in Our Stars, The Notebook, Paper Towns, or It Ends With Us? Give you a second on this film-related question. Once again, we got some pretty smart Newhouse alumni. They know the answer is The Fault in Our Stars. Fantastic. All right. Final thing, and this is another, please fill in and we'll set up a word cloud here, but we want to know who the most influential professor you had during your time at Newhouse. This is a tricky one. Obviously, there may have been more than one influential professor that you had in your time. And when we did this in some of our past programs, certainly the journalism one had a lot of very familiar names. Scooney is one who I think generations of students can absolutely relate to. I'll share that my daughter is actually in the TRF program now. She transferred in and as a junior and has already remarked about Scooney and Bob Thompson and is just getting started. So I'm sure there are more on her list as well. But just some fantastic names, and obviously all of these names and many, many more are part of the history of the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. And so many of us know some of the lessons that are learned at the Newhouse School and used each and every day in our lives as we move on. So let's move on to our program. Thank you all for jumping in and weighing in. And actually, I want to start right there with that question and ask our panelists, who was a professor who had an impact in your lives? And Rosie, you're first on my screen, so I'll start with you.
All right, I'm used to it with the last name Angelo. I was the first to have to answer in grade school, so this is nothing new.
I'm usually at the end, so I get it.
But no, I was very lucky to have a lot of fantastic professors at Syracuse. First one to come to mind is Professor Keith Giglio, who not only while I was at Syracuse was my advisor, was the professor who really was the first person who taught screenwriting for me and got me into that world, but also post-grad. He was the one who recommended that my creative partner and husband Nate and I apply for the CNY Arts Grant, which brought us back to Syracuse to make films. And we got to come back and make a grant-funded short a few years ago. And so even beyond my time at Syracuse, he influenced me. And also I got a bit of a bonus professor because I never had Tula Guenca when I was at school, but through my relationship with Nate, Tula's adopted me as well. And post-grad has been a huge resource and a wonderful mentor for us.
I think some of the things you said there are so important, and that is that you talk about post-grad and you talk about after graduating from Syracuse, because it's not 4 years of your life. It's a lifetime. It's forever orange, and those influences continue to be part of that life forever. Doug, I'll throw it to you. Who's someone who stands out in your time as a student?
I'm gonna go with post grad actually, and I'm gonna say Lorraine Branham, the former dean, just because she really is the person who I feel built the bridge between Newhouse and Hollywood. She really was the forefront in starting SULA, which is, I think, the greatest. If you want to go into this business, the best program that Syracuse has started. So I think Lorraine really was the person who took the lead and understood the connection between Syracuse and Hollywood.
That's a fantastic answer. She had such an influence on so many during her time at Newhouse. Since Doug mentioned SULA, Dwight, I'll go out to you because you certainly have had experience out there helping the current students over the years as an adjunct. But who's someone who stands out to you?
Wow, it's Doug gave such a great answer, and I'll say I'm going to second Lorraine
Fair.
because I'm on the Newhouse advisory board. This is my second go around. The first time around, I was working at Sony Pictures, and it was Lorraine who recruited me to the board and started to establish my reconnection with the school. When I think about undergrad, I would say Sharon Hollenbach. I was a TRF major and an English minor, and I was trying to build my skill as a screenwriter. And Sharon was just really just an amazing professor, terrific storyteller, and always inspired me to pursue my craft. And even though I ended up in a marketing role, storytelling is deeply ingrained in what I do every day.
No doubt about that. Dion, I'll let you wrap up this question. Who's a professor who had an influence on you in your life?
So, Chris, you realize this is a trick question, right? As far as I'm concerned, because it would have to be Roosevelt Rick Wright,
I knew you were
hands
going there.
down. Picture it, Baltimore, 1991. A young freshman named Dion who loved radio, just wanted to be a part of this incredible medium. I meet Dr. Wright, who just exudes radio and it represents everything that was great about radio, a larger than life personality, great content, and I remember freshman year, I just wanted him to know my name. I didn't have him as a professor until my sophomore year, but I'm like, I just need Dr. Wright to know who I am. And one day I'm gonna have my headshot in his office, which eventually happened, which is my greatest achievement, actually. So yeah, Dr. Wright all day.
You talk about your Newhouse origin story and wanting to do radio and meeting Dr. Wright and that kind of making this a pretty clear choice for you.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember just the legend of the Newhouse School. I remember I had applied to Howard University, which also has a very powerful communication school. But I told myself, if Newhouse accepts me, I'm in. And the radio program was a huge component that was a factor of my decision. I think the legend of Newhouse precedes itself, and all the way in Baltimore, Maryland, I knew the power of the school.
From radio to basketball. We had a guy out of Baltimore who did pretty well in basketball too.
He did okay. Yeah, yeah. He did all right.
He's coming back to speak at commencement next month. Doug, what about you? What was your Newhouse origin story?
I'll be honest, I didn't know a lot about it beforehand. And I really wanted to go to USC, which I got into. And I think at the time I was just not emotionally ready to make a move 3,000 miles away from home. And when I got to Syracuse, I was a business major and then started to learn about Newhouse and what they had to offer and transferred and did a dual major when I was there. And, couldn't say that I'm so happy that I did, and really at the time, and I'll go back to Lorraine again, there weren't a lot of bridges between Newhouse and Hollywood. There were, my other choice, Dion, was going to be Rick Wright, and I had no interest in radio. But talk about somebody who was just infectious in his ability to connect with students, his enthusiasm, his general joy for what he did for a living. He brought that to the class every day. And in a world where there are a few professors, because I'm older than all of you, that I actually remember, Rick stands out, and thrilled to still see him when my son was on campus. I would see him, the fact that he's still there. But it was, I would say for me, being here in Hollywood, so much of my Newhouse story is post-grad. It really was the people that are out here that preceded me. And I think because of people like Dwight and people who are out here carrying the torch right now, the connections are so strong. that post-grad, my Newhouse connections are stronger than they ever were. You know, the Newhouse Mafia wasn't a term when I was there, and it's a real term now to see it in action every day, to be on the campus, you know, here in North Hollywood, which is just beautiful now, to have interns in our office every semester, there are so many functions. It's just, you feel like you're a part of Newhouse when you're 3,000 miles away, in some ways, more than I felt like I was a part of Newhouse when I was a student.
That's huge. We're going to spend some time talking about that, the Newhouse network, because it is so powerful and it is one of those lifelong impact things. Rosie, I want to hear about your Newhouse origin story.
Yeah, well, first I do also have to say that I love the Baltimore love because I'm from Baltimore County as well, so makes me happy to hear. But I kind of joke that my biggest sort of naivete is I didn't really know anything about Newhouse when I applied to Syracuse. I applied because I thought I was going to be a writer. You know, whenever you show some love of writing in elementary school, everyone's like, oh, guess you're going to be a writer. You're going to be an English major. So I actually applied to arts and sciences. And I remember on the Common App, I checked Newhouse as like my second choice school at Syracuse because I just didn't know enough about it. And after my first semester, enough people had asked me if I wanted to be either an English teacher or a librarian that I had what I call my mid-semester crisis and freaked out and realized that I wanted to do something a little bit more dynamic. And luckily, having Newhouse on campus, having friends in the program, I realized that all of the things I love about storytelling could be translated into a much more dynamic, collaborative field. And so I made the change, and I actually repping the inner school transfers over here because I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about it at the time, but I'm very proud to have transferred into Newhouse and gotten to rep those schools.
And there's so many stories that, like yours, are not straight lines, right? I mean, so many of our stories go many, many directions. Dwight, take me back to your origin story with Newhouse.
I would say, like everybody on this call, I had an interest in the arts and storytelling. I was sort of a theater kid, and as I was thinking about what I would do after high school and what I would pursue in a career, and I thought, oh, you know, communication sounds great. That sounds right up my alley. And I was applying to all of the top-ranked communication schools, and when I did the research on Newhouse, it just stood out to me. The reputation stood out. Everything about it sounded exciting. And I started to look at the prestigious alum from Newhouse who shaped broadcast and shaped, you know, television as I knew it at the time, and sports. And it was an easy decision for me. And, you know, when I got there, I think I experienced then what many students of mine experience now, and that's I didn't know all this existed. I didn't know these roles existed. I didn't know the breadth of what I could contribute in this industry. I didn't know any of that, and it just opened my eyes to so much. It was really kind of an exciting experience, a little overwhelming, but really exciting to kind of get in there and roll up my sleeves and work in a business that I wanted to be in, but I didn't know. I didn't have half a clue about how amazing it was going to be.
Yeah, that's one of the exciting things, though, right? Is you can come in thinking, oh, this is my path, this is what I want to do, or you can come in and say, this is the area I want to be in, but I need to figure out exactly where it's going to go, and you get the support and the education and the experience that kind of makes you figure out exactly what that is. I want to ask you, Dwight, a little about that, because you said you wanted to be on the other side of the storytelling. How did you shift to where you are now, kind of on the marketing side of the storytelling, to get all of us to come see the stories?
Yeah, I'll pretend it was planned, but it was accidental, right? I was writing and trying to shop spec scripts from the East Coast, literally snail mailing to the West Coast. That's how long ago it was. Student debt was tapping me on the shoulder and reminding me it was there and needed some attention. I had to pay these student loans off. So I took a day job in a call center business and ended up moving from a customer service rep to running the call center business for JP Morgan Chase. And I was still in touch with people in LA that I'd been networking with. And when the call center job ended after about 6 years at Chase, I got an invitation to either take another job in that organization or take a severance check. And I took the check and reached out to one of the people I'd been networking with who'd been kind enough to read my work. And she said, you know, I have something that you might be a good fit for based on all of your skills. And I joined Sony Pictures in 1997 as a director of market research because I was in the job that I had had up until then. I was analytical. I was very customer focused. I was a movie buff deep down. I had amassed a lot of technical skills that actually stayed with me as I worked through research, online research, moved into digital, all of the things that I did leading up to it. I still relied on as I moved into that studio job. And again, on paper, people said, what kind of crazy path is this? It seemed like an accident. Now, when I look back on it, I don't think I would change any of it.
You know, I think, and I know we're probably all biased here, but the skills that you develop, that you learn in communications through Newhouse are so applicable no matter which direction you go and take them. I think that is one of the wonderful things about the education that you get is you could be dropped into another type of role, or pursue another type of role and say, oh, yeah, I can definitely do that. Rosie, take us on your journey after graduation. How did you what was your path?
It was a little convoluted. I took a lot of
There's a theme here with that, I think.
yeah. It's the wonderful thing of you don't really know what you are capable of until you try and do it, I think is a lot of it. As I said, I started as a writer. I thought I was just going to write scripts and, you know, maybe if I worked in TV, I would be able to produce because that's the joint role you play. But along the way, I discovered that I love producing. I love production support. I spent time working in animation development. I spent time working in a little bit of post-production. I spent some time working in sports documentaries on the production side. And at each different job, I learned a different skill set that made me better at what I ultimately want to do, which is tell stories. And for me, that's primarily writing and producing. I love, it turns out, being in control of the creative vision in that way. But it's a situation where every skill that I got that makes me good at the things that I do now came from everything I did along the way. You know, I know how to pitch a project because I spent time in development. I know what wardrobe needs because I've assisted wardrobe. I know what the first AD needs because I've worked in their department. I am a more effective leader because of every job I took along the way, no matter how much they felt like wrong turns at the time. They all led me where I was supposed to be. And so many of those turns were led by Newhouse alumni and friends and people guiding me into it. One of my first post-grad jobs I got because a friend of mine who was actually still a senior, his mom worked at Breakdown Services and he knew that I was working at Sprinkles Cupcakes. I didn't have an industry job yet. And he called me and said, hey, I don't know if you want anything to do in casting, but my mom's company is hiring. Do you want me to send her your resume? And I would never have even known about that job, let alone gotten to go in and interview if it hadn't been for a Newhouse friend who said, hey, here you go. So I learned a lot at every different job and I worked in a lot of meandering ways, but all of it led me to the place I am now. And I'm very grateful for everything I picked up along the way.
You can feel meandering when you're actually in it, but then once you get there, you're like, oh, all right, I see that. Doug, tell us a little about your journey.
Mine was pretty direct. I moved out 2 weeks after I graduated from Syracuse. I started in the mailroom at Creative Artists Agency. I did that for, worked in the mailroom for about 2.5 years as mailroom assistant, and then got promoted to agent fairly quickly, which took me about 3 years, maybe a little less. And then I was a talent agent for 12 years at CAA and represented people like Will Smith and Adam Sandler and Chris Farley and Ashton Kutcher. And then some friends of mine started this company, Endeavor, which is now WME. And I went over with another friend of mine and we started the talent department when there were 6 of us at the agency. Today, that company owns the UFC and WWE, and the people that run that company had tremendous vision of what they wanted to build. I wanted to be an agent, I wanted to be in the content business, and I wanted to be a storyteller. And as that company started to grow, I decided to make the transition to become a television producer. And I've been doing that for about 20 years now. And it's been a great sort of two different, very different careers. One where, that's very transactional, and being a producer still is transactional, but it's also much more creative. So it's been two very different and satisfying careers.
Yeah, using all of those skills. Dion, radio. You came wanting to do radio. You did radio. You're still doing radio. Yeah, give us a little of your journey.
So my journey sounds a lot similar to the stories that you've heard. Literally the reason why, and sidebar number one, getting over a slight sore throat, and number two, Neo and Cheryl Lee Ralph are in the hallway. So if you hear some rowdiness, I apologize. It's one of those days. But the reason why I'm sitting in this seat is because of a Newhouse student. My first job out of college was doing overnights at 92Q in Baltimore. And I was introduced to the program director, my first boss, by a Newhouse student. A colleague of mine, our good friend Melanie Kushner, Chris, introduced me to my first boss. Had I not gone to Syracuse or Newhouse or been a student at WJPZ, I wouldn't be sitting here. So, and similar to Rosie, in my first job, I did everything that was asked of me and things that weren't even asked of me, right? I did overnights, making a whopping $5 an hour, which was trash even then. But I was also on the promotions team. I was also the assistant to the assistant music director. Whatever needed to be done, I wanted to do it because I wanted to be as knowledgeable about this business as I could. And now to this day, as a vice president here at SiriusXM, there is no job that I either haven't done or wouldn't do. From the coordinators right on up to my program directors who report to me. So it's just very important to learn from the bottom up. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. And thanks to Newhouse, I'm in a position to do that.
I've got to believe that the journeys that you all talk about with different career paths, different skill sets that you picked up along the way, willingness to do different things, helps you in a world that is evolving so rapidly. When you talk about every aspect of the entertainment industry, starting with films, obviously pandemic really changed viewing habits for so many people who are just like, I want to watch it on my couch. I don't want to go to a theater. TV and seeing the streaming services and how that has really taken hold of that type of content. And then radio, obviously. And Dion, you've been on both sides. You've been on the terrestrial side, you're on the satellite side, but that's competing with people who are like, I've got my playlist on Spotify. So understanding how much things change, how do you continue to adapt to those changes and use what you've learned to stay ahead of the curve as best as you can? And Rosie, I'll start with you, and kind of in your world, trying to, you talk about pitching and producing and all of that. And Doug, I'll tee you up immediately afterwards because your fields are a little bit similar there. But start there for me. How do you try to stay on top of it all?
I mean, if you've had a conversation with someone in the industry in the last couple of years, they have likely said it is a very challenging time. Less things are getting money, less things are getting funded, less things are getting greenlit. Names don't mean as much as they used to. Everything is changing. The market is changing. And I think at the end of the day, you made a very good point in that it's taking the skills that you've learned in one area and how can they be applied to another, right? So at the end of the day, story is story. So I can take my skill set and I can say, yes, I understand how to, put together a traditional feature film. I also understand, because I've done a little bit of work in podcasts, how that skill set translates to podcasts. I can go work there. I also understand, keeping up on trends in media. Okay, how can I take this and how could I chop it up and convert it into an ad campaign that you could run through Reels? It's sort of thinking about all of the different permutations, but keeping the story at the heart of the idea and figuring out, okay, how can we see this through a different lens? How can we see this creatively? How can we make it work? But it also is, I think, it speaks to the need for a determination to just keep pushing through. A lot of I make independent films. As I said, my husband and I have our own company. He's a Syracuse alum as well, and we've made, at this point, we just wrapped production on our third independent film, and we did it without a lot of assistance outside of, you know, our investors and our team, because at this point we have to be scrappy. You know, we can pitch and we can change our perspective and we can try and get in every door we can, but there's also a point where you just have to say, you know what, if the door's not opening, I'm going to build my own. And that's a skill set that I also learned from being at Newhouse, from making things, from being a part of, you know, the different extracurriculars. And I actually did some work with Jerk Magazine. I got to do video content for them. And I remember learning, like, oh, you want to see it, you can make it. And that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, that's a great lesson. How about you, Doug?
Look, I think the answer starts with never stop learning. Because if you stand still and you're not aware of what's happening, and you know, if you're not really looking at, because everyone's talking about it, AI right now, and how is it going to change the business, and how is it a tool to be used, and so I think it's just constantly evolving. And understand, you know, one of my favorite shows is The Wire, and there's a quote from The Wire which is, "The game is the game," and anybody from Baltimore will appreciate it.
A lot of Baltimore love happening here today.
But the truth is, like, if you think you're going to change the system, you're probably not. So you have to figure out how you're going to work within the system. And that means just constantly adapting. We had to adapt during COVID. You had to adapt to how shows were pitched. You had to adapt to how shows were shot. Now with AI, you have to think about, okay, how are we going to use that as a tool? How are we going to use it as in production? How are we going to use it in the writer's room? How do we use that as a tool, not to replace, but to enhance? And so it's evolving with the times. You know, you either keep up or you get out, and those are the two choices. So for me, it's just constantly learning. You know, it's getting Soros when it's in beta, and trying to figure out what's text to video going to look like, and how do we use that in production. And just cost is on everybody's mind right now. How do you shoot things cheaper? How do we find ways? So it's just constantly evolving. You know, I joke with Dean Lodato sometimes that, you know, television, radio, and film is, in my opinion, a little bit of an antiquated name for a major, because Rosie hit on it really well, which is, we're storytellers. And all of these are just different platforms to tell stories, whether it's podcasts, movies, television. We're all just storytellers. Now, by the way, social media, they're all places to tell stories. And that's the one commonality of everything in that major. And even when you're pitching a show, you're telling a story. Dwight said it when he started. When he's selling a show, you're telling a story. What's going to get somebody from their home to the theater? So that, to me, is the strength of Newhouse. And I think Newhouse as a school understands that really well, which is, what's the story and how are you going to tell it? And it applies to broadcast journalism. It applies to every area that Newhouse touches: PR, advertising, all of it. What's the story? How are you going to tell it? And that's the bare bones of what we all do.
Yep, I was just going to say that's exactly what I tell my students, is they're storytellers. You're
Yeah.
gathering facts, you're gathering information, but boy, if you're not telling a story, no one's paying attention.
Right.
Dwight, how do you storytell to make people want to go see that movie? They can't all be Barbies and Wickeds, I guess, right? Like,
I was hoping, Chris, you were going to answer that for me. I was hoping that. Listen, I interestingly approached the marketing job recognizing both the privilege I have of being in this business, right? I'm in one of a handful of seats in this business, but I also know that for the people on this conversation who make shows, who make movies and shows, and that you know, the effort to make that, just about everything has to go right to get to a place where you've got a product that you can deliver for an audience. And so I always think really deeply about the audience. I always think about the effort it took to get this thing into our hands as marketers, and the respect and care we need to bestow on that thing. And then we've got to respect the audience and say, okay, this was made for someone. We greenlit it for someone. Now let's give it our level best so that we can get it into the hands of an audience that can experience what the creators intended, what the craftspeople intended, what the artists and visionaries intended. And that always motivates me, right? One thing that we're seeing right now in the business is there is no floor anymore at the box office, right? Movies are opening as low as you can imagine them to open. And, to your question, Chris, we don't know why one is a runaway hit and why one isn't. Minecraft is a great example, Warner Brothers. That movie, its pre-release tracking did not indicate it was going to be a record-setting opening for a movie based on a video game adaptation. But something happened with an audience. Something happened between 12 to 27-year-olds who showed up in numbers because they were activated by their affinity for this property, their nostalgia in some cases, the talent, the experience that it promised. All of that worked in a way that nobody in the business forecast. That's why it's magical, right? So we try to do that every time out. Try to do that every time out on behalf of the creators of these properties. And sometimes we just don't get it done because the audience is fickle and they decide in the moment sometimes, I don't want that. I want that. So I will say just to the people listening, and I think maybe Doug said it, but be curious, because that's the only way that we can solve keeping up with the audience, right? Really be curious and always be learning, always be a student of this business.
And I'll say this one thing in defense of Dwight, which is, as somebody who creates the product and has the best intentions, and you always do, sometimes no matter how hard you try, we just don't give somebody like Dwight the tool to give him something good enough to sell.
It's a lot of pieces that have to all fit together.
In about 28 years in this business, no producer has ever said that. But thank you, Doug.
I think this is being recorded too, so just so you know, we can play it back. Dion, I feel like I've been reading radio's obituary for like the last 25 years, but it's not dead. But you got to keep evolving to keep up with it.
Right.
How do you try to do that?
So when I first got started in the business, there was an artist named Montel Jordan that we just knew was going to be the future of R&B.
This is how we do it.
Didn't work out too well for him. Although, I mean, the song has legs, but you have to evolve, right? Like you nailed it, right? We recently acquired Pandora to our platform, which was necessary to do in this space because the share radio listening is down, but at the end of the day, people want engagement. People want, certain fundamentals will always remain throughout all of our media, right? People want stories told to them. People want engagement. People want a sense of community, right? People want, in my case, discovery. We live in a very rampant on-demand universe where I want to watch this show right now. I want to hear this album right now. However, there is a significant part of the audience, goes back to what Dwight was saying, stay in tune with your audience. There's a very significant part of the audience that says, you guys do that. I don't want to pick my own music. I don't want to curate this. You guys pick that. And you have enough options to where if you want to hear hits, if you want to hear R&B, hip hop, country, if you want to hear gems, if you want to hear bigger hits, it's up to us to kind of provide those lanes. But again, the discovery aspect is, I think, part of what keeps radio vibrant and relative. Two things really change over time, right? The content and the consumption, what you hear and how you hear it. But keeping those going is really fundamental. And to me, Chris, that's really the fun part. I've been blessed to be in this biz, as we all have, by the power of just evolving and engaging. Doug mentioned AI. AI is our friend. We use AI for everything from copywriting to marketing pitches. And we're just scratching the surface with that. So you really have to really engage and embrace media. I look forward to how it's going to evolve, after we've kind of passed our prime in this business, because they will continue to. Again, Montel Jordan, everything will evolve over time. And I think that's the fun part, just to be a student of it and continue to learn from it.
This is how we do it. How are we going to do it tomorrow, I guess, is the question. We just have to keep staying on top of that.
You
right?
summed it up perfectly, Chris. Yes.
I often quote Montel Jordan in my daily life. Well, keeping all of that in mind, and you've all kind of alluded to it, but what can Newhouse do, and what should Newhouse students do so that as they graduate and head out and want to kind of follow some path in this industry, be as prepared as possible? And Deanne, I'll start with you, and specifically for people who want to work in the audio space, who want to, who maybe are part of the Bandier program, are part of trying to do radio. They still have that love that you and I had when we got here.
Yeah, the first thing I'll say, and this may be a question that you may ask us later, but the best advice that I was given in this business is always respect those who have come before you. Always embrace those who have something to say, because as big as we want to think this industry is, it's really quite small. And I always joke with our incoming intern classes that someday you're going to hire me. So please be kind. And the older I get, the truer that becomes. So always respect every person that you meet along the way, because you will see them again in some way, shape, or form. Now, specifically as it relates to what I do, first, you've got to understand where this business is right now. It's no secret that the industry isn't as a whole doing as well as it once did, right? That's no secret at all. So I encourage you to learn as many facets of what makes this thing tick as possible. Make yourself a fly on the wall in every lane that you can. Be the person that is not as easily dispensable as someone else may be. If you have an interest in sports, walk down the hall and learn about talk programming. If you got an interest in DSPs, round the corner and, talk about building a podcast. Like, make yourself as versatile and as permanent in this position as you can. Just learn as much of it as you can. And also, to go back to your other question, embrace change and be a change agent. Come into this industry with an idea. They say everything's been done before, thought of before, and to an extent they're right? But there's always a new format. There's always a new method of storytelling. There's always a new story to tell. So come with something unique to bring to the table yourself, and make your skill set as strong as you can, to where if and when your business does go through staff reductions, as it will happen, you make yourself as indestructible as possible, because you do more than one thing there.
Rosie, I saw you nodding a lot there. Did he steal all the good answers?
No, I mean, well, yes, he said some fantastic things. It's just in general, it's really cool to be on a panel with people who have such incredible experiences and such incredible insights to share. I'm gonna leave this so inspired, and it's so special to be a part of it. But those are all wonderful answers, especially the making yourself indispensable. A few things I would throw in, especially for current students. I have two main ones. The first one is you have to learn outside of the classroom. Doug, I think you talked about this a little bit with the importance of the LA program, and honestly, it's something I should have touched on whenever we talked about professors who made an impact, because what Robin Howard has done is absolutely incredible. She was a production professor when I did my LA semester. She runs the program now, and the growth and opportunities they have made for students out here to learn how this industry works is absolutely incredible. So A, the program is fantastic, but B, what is the core of it is you have to learn outside of just the classroom. So even beyond doing an LA program or an internship, listen to podcasts, read books, read the trades, look up interviews of filmmakers you admire, watch making of documentaries, because you're not going to learn everything about how the industry works and all of its nuances in a classroom. You have to learn that yourself. So A, do your homework in that sense. And then the other thing that I would say, and this is my controversial Newhouse take. I have a lot of Newhouse pride, but I do think something that happens often is because there are technically two programs with film in the name at Syracuse, is you end up with a bit of competition between Newhouse and DPA. And what I have learned, especially mentoring students over the years from both programs, is that each school has an incredible skill set that the other school could benefit from. So another piece of advice I would give would actually be to get to know your VPA comrades, work with them, learn from one another, because you will be so much stronger for the partnerships that you forge there. You can bleed orange for Newhouse, but also Syracuse as a whole, and leaning on those friendships is something that I think is very helpful and overlooked.
Well said. Thank you. Doug, you mentioned before just the idea that just kind of putting something in a bucket and saying TRF it's evolving so much that there's more to it. And you know, we've heard a lot obviously from Dion and Rosie, but anything to add to what they're saying as to how to adjust, how to be ready?
On top of what Dion and Rosie said, I think that, you know, equally as important to all of those things, and you know, this is what builds a well-rounded career, is all of these, and Newhouse provides these opportunities, but it's expanding your own network. You know, one of the best things somebody once told me is your network is your net worth, and there's so much truth to that. And no matter who you are, there's somebody that you should or can be reaching out to. You don't have to reach out to Dwight Keynes to learn about marketing if that's what you're interested in. I guarantee you that within this industry, somebody from the Newhouse network is an assistant, is a low-level executive, or who will take that time to have a 15-minute Zoom with you. Don't just watch something. To say, hey, I loved your work, that maybe we'll start a relationship with. How do you expand your own network so that, you know, you can use those relationships to meet people whose stories you may want to tell, or may introduce you to somebody that knows the publisher of a book that may be coming out that you think will be a great story? How do you understand, you know, what other people are doing? So to me, it's really just always reaching out. You know, send 30 emails to people, maybe 2 get responses. That's okay. Don't send 10 emails to the person who didn't respond, but take advantage of the people who did. Find a reason to stay in touch with those people, not just, hey, how are you? But like, I saw what you just did. Congratulations. Doesn't have to be anything more than that. Just continue to, you know, there are a lot of people who sit at their computer all day and do their work. And there's a lot of validity to do that. But if you want to do this is a people business. And you got to get out there and you got to meet people and you got to build your network. And that's, to me, what school doesn't really teach you how to do, but you got to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. Be curious is something that was said. I think Dwight, or you said that earlier, and connect.
Yeah.
And follow up. That's all. Anything to add to that? A lot has been said, Dwight, but
I mean, all the good answers were taken, guys. That's not fair. No, I literally, when I was prepping for today, I scribbled a note on the questions on the email invitation to this event, and I had written no job too small, which was something that Dion touched on in the beginning, right? The idea of do any and every task that needs to be done if you have the capacity to do it, learn in that process, and then be acknowledged and recognized as somebody who gets shit done, right? Oh, Dwight will do that. He'll get that done for me. I want him on my team. He'll get it done, right? And when they start making the tough choices about who stays and who goes when we're cost cutting, I want to keep the people who just get shit done, right? That
Makes
person
your life
no
easy. Who
ego
makes your
about
life
it,
easier?
right? The other thing, and Rosie said it was learn outside the classroom. Couldn't agree more. If you say you want to be in the movie business and you come for an interview with me and I say, "Oh, what's the last movie you saw?" and you go, I don't know." I'm like, "This interview's over. You need to see everything that's current, have a point of view about it. When we sit down, tell me why you think it worked. Tell me why the marketing sucked, or why it was amazing, or why it didn't reach you." I mean, I think all those things are incredibly important. And then I just, we've said it. The Newhouse Mafia again didn't exist for me either, but it's a real thing. When a Newhouse person reaches out to me, 9 times out of 10, I will respond. Right? That means that 1 out of 10, it wasn't a good enough inquiry. They're not all going to be perfect. But if you reach out and you say, "Hey, listen, I went to Newhouse. Here's where I am in my career. I'm either going to pivot or I'm just graduating or I'm doing whatever. And I noticed that you did X, Dwight, and I have a question about X." That's easier for me to say, "Great, I could make time to start a conversation about that," as opposed to just, Doug said it. "Hello, how are you? Can we get coffee?" It's probably going to be a no.
Right.
But you guys just opened a movie and it was incredible, or I was confused as to why it didn't work, or I was surprised that you gave everything away in the marketing and it still worked. I want to talk about that. I'll take that call.
Yeah.
I'll always take that call.
One of the coolest things I feel like about this Newhouse network is that all of you and I certainly am in this boat as well, have that story of the person in front who helped you, right? Who, "Oh, I wouldn't be here if not for that person who set me up with this person and we made this connection." And then you get to that point in your career, hopefully, where you then are that person for somebody else, and it continues to grow in that way. You may have already talked about it, but I love hearing these stories. I think everyone kind of loves hearing these stories because they make us all feel really just kind of good about the group that we're part of. But do you have a favorite story like that, whether it's somebody who helped you or somebody that you were able to help and you can now say, "You know what, I remember when they were just getting started." And Dwight, I'll let you go first this time.
Oh, thanks for that. That's a tough one, because I have to single somebody out. I don't know that, my act 3 is where I'm at in my career, right? I'm firmly in act 3, but given the stock market, there may be another act. I don't know but I've shaped myself to be a mentor as part of my 3rd act, right? So
You've had full classes too, so you don't have to single people out. You've actually, I mean, you've had access and interaction with a
yeah,
number of students.
and there are a handful of students who, on their own accord, have reached out to me to say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm interviewing for this thing. And I'd love to ask you about how I'm preparing." And that's always been meaningful. And it's usually at this point for me in my career, it's usually a former student who took the note, right? I always say when I'm in a classroom, whether I'm teaching it or guest lecturing, "Hey, there's 15 of you, there's 40 of you, there's 20 of you. I'm not going to remember any of you at the end of the semester unless you do something to be memorable." It's just the sad truth. I'm getting old. I can't remember, I'm always like to my wife, "Who's that person?" And so if you make yourself memorable, it goes to that idea of making yourself indispensable, right? I want that person on my team. So I can't pick a single person, but usually my students are the ones who I am pleased to be able to help get them onto whatever that next step is.
Yeah, I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable picking a single person, but if you have a story, I'd love to hear it. Rosie, do you have a story to share?
Yeah, I have a couple. The first one that I want to emphasize is, yes, there's absolutely room to mentor people who are coming up below you and raise them up, but a lot of your connections and a lot of your help is going to come from right beside you. My favorite Syracuse partnership will forever be with my creative partner and my husband. We didn't know each other super well at school, but we moved out to LA together. We became friends. And after a year of dating, because we put a pause on it, we needed to establish that first, we started making movies together. And because it's not just the two of us in that Syracuse family, it's our cinematographer for our past 3 features has been a friend of both of ours since college, Nick Ferrero. So you build these friendships and you come up together, and those are some of my favorite partnerships for sure. But there's always room for new friends and new partnerships to come along. The most recent one that I love is really wonderful recent grad, Jesse Brown. He was a Syracuse grad who was out for the LA program. And whenever we screened one of our features for the current students, he stopped to talk to us afterwards. And he didn't just stop to talk to Nate and I, he also kept in touch with our cinematographer, Nick. And whenever it came time to make our newest movie, Nick said, hey, if there's room for another person on my team, I think that this kid would make a really great second AC. And he became honestly an indispensable part of our team. He worked 3 different jobs because it's indie film and everyone wears a lot of hats. And he did DIT, second AC, PA work. He did all of it for us. And he became such an intrinsic part of our team. And it's because after a Syracuse panel, he followed us out, got to know us, had a conversation with us, and then kept that connection going.
So important. We're running short on time, but Doug, do you have a story you want to share?
I mean, there's a lot of them. There's so many interns that have come through here and now have careers in the business. And I'd say that there are really 2 kinds of interns that come here. Those that are doing an internship and those who are looking for a career. And you can immediately tell the difference between the 2. And whether you're looking for a career or not, be the intern that's looking for a career. Don't be, don't come in here and just sort of go about your day. Sometimes people are too afraid to ask. Don't be afraid. Ask. Stand out. Find a reason to engage. You don't sit in the corner just reading a script and doing your coverage and going home, because like Dwight said, you won't be remembered. You could give the greatest coverage in the world. You could summarize a script better than any other student who's ever been here, and you won't be remembered. Because you're going to get remembered as a person, and you're going to get remembered for your curiosity, your sense of engagement, and did you take advantage? And again, a word I always come back to: your curiosity, and doing all of that with walking the line between not being annoying. And if you do that well, and you know where that line is, and you get right up to it and don't cross it, you're going to be remembered, and you're going to have a career like so many people who came through here. The opportunities to intern at the place where our students get to intern is, I wish I would have had those opportunities. That's all I wanted. I didn't want to sit in a classroom. I wanted to get my hands dirty. That wasn't an opportunity when I was a student. It is an opportunity, what Rosie said, what Robin Howard and everyone at SULA, what Joan Adler has done. It's an amazing, amazing experience. And now that you have it in Washington, D.C., if that's the area you want to go into, the school provides so many incredible opportunities for anybody to take advantage of. Don't treat it like a class. Treat it like the opportunity that it is, because that's how you're going to start your career.
Yeah, be memorable, be indispensable, don't be annoying. Those are 3 great tips. Dion, final word to you. And I see you at the WJPZ reunion banquet, and the students and the young alumni, like you are a god to them. And so I'm sure that there are folks throughout your time that you've been able to say, I love to see what this person became.
Ironically enough, my story kind of is a part of the banquet is a part of my story. And I'll wrap up my short story with with advice. Be ready, so you don't have to get ready. So I'm in the rental car. No. Cahill picked me up. Our good friend Cahill picked me up from the airport during one of our WJPZ alumni banquet weekends, and we're going from the airport to campus. So of course we're listening to Z89, and I hear a voice on the station. Her name is Mina Yona. She sounded incredible. A current student at the time. I'm listening to her show on the radio, and it blew me away. I've got to meet this person. She got it. She was ready. You know, she checked off all the boxes, all the fundamentals, everything we teach, and was just one of one. I met her when I got to campus, and I said, I just got to know you. I've got to know you. We stayed in touch. Long story short, she does nights for me at SiriusXM today. She was ready. And that's our job. So once you get put on, you are obligated to reach back and pull up that next person and be ready. Be ready now. Mina didn't know. Be ready.
Yeah. Dion, Doug, Dwight, Rosie, thank you all. Great stories, great advice as well for the next generation. And we really appreciate you being a part of it. I love that I heard the word opportunity a lot, because that really, as we talk about celebrating 60 years of Newhouse, we're talking about celebrating 60 years of opportunities and looking forward to those future opportunities. So this has been a wonderful celebration of that in these industries. There's so many more things that we could talk about. I've got a couple of questions that came in that I wish I could have asked, but the conversation was too good, and unfortunately, maybe we'll have to do a part 2 at some point. But thank you all for being a part of this today. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to do one more 60th anniversary celebration special. It's going to be on one of the things Newhouse certainly is known for, sportscasting, and we're planning that for later spring, early summer, when all of those very busy sportscasters maybe have a little time to join us. So thanks again for everyone for supporting Newhouse, because really that is what it's all about. That's what keeps this legacy going and moving forward, keeps these opportunities coming for current students. Thank you all for being here, and as always, go Orange.